I have opened the Titanic data, the survival data, and I'm going to quickly show you how to do a bar chart which is clustered or stacked. I'm going to look to see if there is a difference in survival between the different ports of embarkation. So that's the ports are here, Cherbourg, Queenstown and Southampton, and survival is 0 for no and 1 for yes. And obviously if you're doing these charts for real, you should add some of these labels onto your charts. So in Excel, I'm in the Insert tab, and I need to do what's called a pivot chart because we need it to add up all the data because this is the raw data and it has not been summarized. If you don't have this option because you're using a different version of Excel, you probably need to look for a pivot table first and then chart it. So this is the pivot table here, but in a different version of Excel, it might be under a different tab, it might be under data or somewhere else. So under pivot chart, I'm going to ask for the chart and the table because I just like to see the numbers. It selected all the data and that's fine because we can select the actual variables that we want in the next step, and I'll have it pasted all into a new worksheet so it doesn't go over the top of my existing data. Now when it first pops up it's all blank, which is exceedingly unhelpful, I feel. What I like to do first, and I'm not really an expert in Excel, but my preference is always to try and get this x-axis sorted out so I've got some clue as to what it's going to do. So if I want to see who survived or died from the different ports of embarkation, I want a different x-axis category for each port. So I'm going to drag the variable embarked, this one, down to axis. So select that and just drag and drop it in and make sure it pops up there. You can see that it's got the labels from that column, Cherbourg, Queenstown and Southampton, and it's also got this blank one, which I think means it's got that ready to count up any blank rows. I think we can safely ignore that in this case. If you go to the table where it's going to do the counting and just click on that little arrow, you can untick the blank and it won't count that up. Okay. Now, what we're interested in from each of these ports are who survived. So let's get the variable survived, and we're going to drag this down into values. Now, it might come up with sum, as in it's going to add it up, but we actually want it to count. So if you click on that little arrow next to sum of survival and choose value field settings, we can change that to count. Now, sometimes when I do this, it pops up with count automatically. And sometimes it doesn't. I don't know why. If someone does know why, you could tell me. That would be very helpful. Now, it has counted up all the values, but it's just counted them up all together. It hasn't split them into who survived and who died. So that's not very helpful. What we need to do is create 2 columns for each one of these points. So this bit here. And we actually need to reuse this same variable survived and drag it into columns. That didn't work. Drag it in. Okay, so that's looking good now. So we've got that. So 0 was died and 1 was survived. So we've got a lot of people dying when they embarked at Southampton. So this is sort of fine as a chart. I don't have a title on it yet, which would be nice. You can probably find out how to add that in. Probably would like to change some of these labels and would like to add some labels into this legend. The other thing I might want to do is change this into a percentage, because at the moment, although I can see the number, the count of who survived, if I want to compare to see if the percentages are different across the ports, it probably would be more helpful to have it just plot the percentages straight out. If you right click on the chart, you can change which one it is, change chart type, and you see that we've got the clustered column chart or a bar chart depending on what package you're using. We can also have it stacked, where it stacks the survived and died on top of each other. I find that if you've got different counts in each category, and you can see that we don't have very many people in Queenstown but a lot in Southampton, then the stacked bar charts by themselves tend not to be very helpful. unless of course you convert it into a percentage so that they're all on the same scale, and this is then easier to use. You just need to remember when you're converting things to a percentage that each of these is not created equal, and that there were a lot more people at Southampton than there were at Queenstown. Okay, so now with this chart we can see that there was a much greater proportion of people who survived from Cherbourg, and I've got no idea why that is. I don't really know anything about the Titanic unless it was in the movie. So that's how you do a stacked bar chart in Excel. Please add titles in if you're doing these, and add your labels in too.